Hawke Media.
Thank you very much for that introduction, Caroline. As she said, I'm Hawke's head of marketing, and today kind of what we're going to go through is kind of an early stage introduction of social media and kind of what's going on in the space. So ultimately, you can lead to the goal of speaking social and being competent in that area. The reason that I want to talk about it so much is because I think it's one of the areas that brands and companies still struggle with sometimes. So I think it's important to always kind of have that, conversation about what's going on and how we can do things better. Obviously today, one of the things that I'm talking about is social engagement, and the reason that we're talking about it is because it is one of the primary and strongest drivers of your company's story online. Obviously, we all know in this room, brand storytelling is extremely important to our brand, and social engagement is one of the most important parts of that. So that's why I want to talk about this today. I want to step into a minute in the internet space and kind of talk about what's happening in an internet minute. In a minute online, $750,000 are spent, 1.8 million snaps are sent, 156 million emails are sent,
You can't stand that.
something like 500,000 tweets are posted. So you're basically, the reason to talk about this is that competing on social media is competing for attention in a world that is already inundated with information and extremely ADD. So it's important that you make sure that you're staying on top of what's going on and how to best convey your brand. Otherwise, you're not going to get any portion of that attention. So I think whenever you talk about social media strategy and planning, it's important to talk about what's happening currently in the space and what are the changes that are occurring and where the future holds. Kind of the first thing that we want to talk about is that there's been major algorithmic changes to Facebook and Instagram over the last couple of years. Obviously, back in 2014, Facebook switched from having a chronological feed to having a algorithmic-based feed based on engagement. The digital marketing world sort of panicked after that because we didn't know what that meant. We didn't know how we were going to get in front of our customers, and that ultimately led to us learning that we had to engage with them. Now, everybody sort of switched over to Instagram. Instagram sort of became more popular for brands to be using. And then ultimately what happened is Facebook kind of did the same thing with Instagram and said, hey, we're not doing chronological here anymore either. It's algorithm. And everybody panicked again, even though we'd already experienced this once before. So it's important that you make sure that you're staying on top of it. Because now, with these algorithm-based changes, user engagement with a brand has dropped something like 54%. At one point, your organic reach was something like 16.5% of your consumer base. Now it's dropped to 6.5%, and some studies even show that it's as low as 2%. And that's if you're doing nothing to engage with them. Those numbers increase as you get better at engaging with your consumer base. So it's important that we kind of shape the narrative around this as making sure that everything you do is all about what your customer wants, what your client base wants, not what you want to do. Obviously, what also happened in the last year is that we sort of have the battle of the story platforms. We have Snapchat stories, Instagram stories, and believe it or not, there's also Facebook Messenger stories, which not a lot of people use, but it still exists. And that's actually, some people think that that's for a reason, that Facebook created Facebook Messenger stories to essentially sort of delude the market and push Snapchat out of it. So I don't really think you need to engage on Facebook Messenger stories because it's just sort of there and people aren't really using it. However, Snapchat stories and Instagram stories are the two major competitors in this space, and it's really important that you're engaging on both of these platforms. Now, the question becomes, which one is better? Right now, neither of them, would I say, is really better in terms of functionality than the other. Each one keeps making improvements to help grow their platform, and the other one sort of follows in kind. For example, just I think yesterday, Snapchat announced that you were going to be able to search by topic, and then Instagram followed and said you could search by location. Not really the same thing, but both are constantly working to improve. So it is important that you stay on one of those. We also saw in the last year the kind of the proliferation of the live social media, obviously with Facebook Live, Instagram Live, Periscope. I think is still a company. I'm not really sure. Nobody really seems to use it. But obviously these platforms have become really important, and part of the reason they've become important, it's not just about getting on the platform, it's about understanding why it's important. The reason that live social media has become, I believe, so important is because Essentially, at its core, social media is kind of about living in the past, right? Your feed is living on. You get what I'm saying? Your feed's living off of when it was chronological. It was definitely living in the past. Even on an algorithm, you're still seeing things from minutes, hours, moments ago. Whereas with the live social media, it kind of brings everything back into the moment, and you can have that first real opportunity to have like an actual engaging moment with a brand or a friend that you like, where you can actually in the moment say, I like this, I comment on this, and they can respond immediately. So I think that's why we're seeing it increase so much. Pinterest allows for affiliate links again. Now, some people would argue that Pinterest isn't really a social media platform because it's so sort of self-induced. I pin things because I want to pin them, not because I care whether you see what I pin. But I would argue that it's actually a social media network for brands themselves. Because of the low peer-to-peer engagement that occurs on Pinterest, you actually can have a really strong amount of brand engagement that occurs in there. So allowing to have those affiliate links again increase the number of users that came back to the platform. They're in turn increasing your opportunities to engage with them. And then finally, Snapchat exploded. Just to kind of prove that point, there were 500,000 snaps sent per minute in 2016, and now there's almost 2 million sent a minute in 2017. And that obviously is what also led to the growth in Instagram stories and this desire to have these sort of engaging social media moments where everybody just sees it, engages with it, and then it's gone into the stratosphere of the web. So it's important when we're talking about social media to also talk about choosing the right network. A lot of times I have people kind of come up to me and they have two worlds of thought. They either think Facebook's the only social media network, or they want to be on every single social media network, both of which are wrong. The reason that the choice of network is important in this case and why you should sort of focus on what you do best is it kind of comes down to, I'm going to kind of jump to the bottom for a second, sort of the less is more mentality. There's a lot of social media networks out there. I think, if you were to just do a quick count, there's at least 10 that we can probably all name off of, and then there's still probably 50 more that one or two people in the room would know. It doesn't make sense as a brand, and it deludes your brand if you're trying to tell your story on every single one of those platforms. It is better to pick 1 to 3 that you do really, really well and do that as perfectly as you can. But your choice of network also depends on a number of factors, including your target audience. So I think it's important that when you are choosing what network makes the most sense for you, to spend some time in your data, in your analytics, and understand who your audience is and where they're coming from to best understand where you can reach them at. It's also important to understand when you're choosing your social network what you are. I make the point here that B2B is very different from B2C. That sounds obvious at the top level, but it really isn't. We'll see a lot of brands that use Facebook from a B2B perspective, and they're using it for prospecting. That works for a B2C a B2C brand. It doesn't work for a B2B brand. We find that social networks work best for a B2B brand when it's about telling their story, not forcing somebody to make a decision. I want to point to this quote from Eric Qualman, who's kind of a social media guru, this relates right back to what we're talking about here. It says that we don't have a choice anymore on whether we do social media. A lot of brands kind of want to avoid it, or they want to do too much of it, but you have to be engaging with this. We don't have the choice on whether we do social media. The question is how well we do it. And that goes into the point I just made before about choosing the right network, but it also goes into my next point I want to talk about, which is crafting the right message, which at its core basically means say words good and be more better at what you do. So your messaging, similar to choosing the right network, is going to depend on a myriad of different factors that are going to require you getting your hands dirty in your analytics of what you've done, what you're going to do, and what you would like to do. This requires you to understand your audience, also understand the platform you're on, understand the time of day that you're posting and what your goal is. You also want to look at what you're trying to accomplish with your post and crafting your message. Are you aiming to educate them, entertain them, convince them? Obviously, those messages are all extremely different. If you want to educate somebody, you don't want to hit them with a really hard CTA that forces them to buy a pair of shoes. You want to hit them with a call to action that gets them to download a white paper or read your blog post or engage with your brand in a different level. If you're looking to convince somebody to purchase your product, you don't want to send them to a page on your website that's designed to entertain. You want to send them to the right page. So your messaging all has to be crafted around that. It's also important that you understand what the story is that you're trying to tell and how shareable it is. The benefit to social media is that you're in front of so many people and you have the opportunity for that, increase in virality to occur. So if you're not crafting that message around a story that is shareable, you're leaving opportunity and engagement on the table. And finally, you want to make sure that you're tracking your KPIs. The reason you want to look into this is because you can compare your messaging from the quarterly, monthly, weekly, and especially if you're doing testing, you can pull into all this data and use it to craft a better message. Every platform has kind of a different way in which it should be engaged with. I'll send out my slides after this show. You'll probably get an email from Hawke tomorrow that will include them, so you don't have to try to read this small writing up there now. But basically the gist of it is that you're not going to want to send a new shoe that your company is releasing to somebody on LinkedIn. That's not the place for that. LinkedIn's a place where you engage with somebody in a professional and business manner. Twitter, for example, is better used for sharing direct links and getting people to actually engage and drive traffic to your website. It's not used to be a visual network, whereas Facebook and Instagram are visual networks. So again, crafting your message, you want to craft it to the platform. And then there's this column about Google+. Does anybody in here actually have a Google+ account that they actively use? That's the key. You actively use it? Do you like it?
I like it. Yeah, I call a lot of international.
Okay, cool. Touche. All right. Well, do you want to? And again, also understanding when I talk about analytics is looking into what performs the best. For example, Facebook posts with less than 250 characters, contrary to popular belief, get 60% more engagement. This is obviously a factor relating to the fact that it's leaning towards a more visual and video-driven platform than it used to. But that also means that when you post a video, don't post a 4-page note about why this video is awesome. And again, I wanted to put in a little quote, just, if nobody wants to take my advice, they can certainly take Seth Godin's, which I think most of us would agree knows his stuff. Marketing's no longer about what the stuff you make, it's about the stories you tell, which again is why we use social media, because we can tell our brand story so cleanly and clearly. And finally, I talked at the beginning about what changed, and now I want to talk about what's changing. And things are definitely changing in the world of social media. Obviously, you want to make sure you're paying attention to these things that are changing as they move forward. And one of the things that we want you to focus on and consider in the next year is the area of opportunity for censorship that's going to occur. Obviously, with the rise in Facebook, in fake news, we've seen an increase in the desire to censor, delete, hide things on the platform. I don't know how many of you are aware in here, but ultimately Facebook and any social network is an opted-in network, and we're governed by their terms of service. They could censor tomorrow selling women's shoes on Facebook, and we just have to roll with that punch. So being aware that they're not going to, but they could. So being aware of what's changing in their algorithms and their censorship is important to know what's going to happen to your brand. You're also going to see a rise in the increase of the use of platforms that allow you to use a pseudonym. I was going to try to say that word, but it's like really hard. I can never get it out right. But basically, these are the platforms like Reddit where you're allowed to sort of hide and create your own online identity that's not attached to your real world identity. And the reason that these are becoming so prolific is the fact that I get to be who I am on this platform. But it also, as a marketer, is an area of opportunity for us because it's so easy to find your consumer base on these websites. They literally have groups devoted to them, and all you have to do is go engage with that group. You want to sell golf clubs tomorrow on Reddit, you just go to R Golf and sell golf clubs on Reddit. They might get mad at you, but you could try it. So I think we're going to see an increase in the rise of those types of platforms. Obviously, chatbots are becoming really big. There's chatbots now that you can create that will allow you to have somebody search or request information, and it'll send them the information on a pair, on a shirt that they want, or a book that they're looking for, or a white paper that you wrote, and it sends it to them immediately. There's chatbots that are entertaining and just for fun, and there's chatbots that are really AI-driven and driven to answer questions efficiently. So I think we're going to see that occurring more and more, and brands that are not engaging in creating these chatbots are going to slowly lose their ability to use social media effectively. And I think with the rise of chatbots, we're going to see the hybridization of customer engagement. We're going to see more people using chatbots as basically like the calling tree when you call Progressive and you have to like click through 900 things. Same thing's going to happen on social media. You'll be engaging with these. It already does, but we're going to see that more and more. And we're also going to see that hybridization of customer engagement as we start to learn how to bridge the online and offline world better as we are every day. Finally, in kind of conclusion here, I just want to say that using social media, it's difficult, right? There's a lot of challenges in what we do in the social media sphere, but it's really not hard. If you kind of follow the steps that I've suggested, follow your gut a little bit and always kind of stay true to your brand story, you're going to do well, and then you're not even going to have to worry about it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chris. Awesome. So up next, we have Jared Blitz from Blitz Creative. Woo!
Check. Wow, that was really uninformative, Chris. So, would have loved you to have done some homework on Google+. First of all, thank you to Jeff and Hawke Media and Carolina and everybody who's helped put this together tonight. It's awesome. No idea this place existed, but it's pretty damn cool. Influencer. So I'm here to talk to you guys tonight about what it's like actually working with an influencer. I don't like the name because it's not really my day job. I'm a creative director at Advantage, which is an IPG agency. On the side, I run Blitzworld, which is an Instagram account that I started with my fiance 2 years ago as a resource for sustainable and attainable travel and adventure ideas. Our goal was basically to never ever feature anything that you couldn't actually pay for in miles or with a real job, not a trust fund. So that's something that we were pretty passionate about. No like $20,000 safaris that like people are like acting like they're 24 and can afford. So that was something we really wanted to avoid. But we wanted to show people things that they could do, that they could have fun, they could be outside. That's to us the most important thing is really exploring kind of the outside world, and you know that a lot of that is free. So just some quick bits on us. I mean, we've got a little over 200,000 followers right now. We're getting about 25,000 impressions. Unfortunately, this has gone down with the new algorithm that Chris talked about. It kind of sucks for everybody. But certainly, you know, for an account like ours where we don't actually put our faces in it, we've decided early on that it was going to be something where we wanted to feature photography, either our own or our friends. And we wanted to feature places and not really be like the stars of the show. And the problem is that people are much less likely to like a photo if it's of a place, because they'll just be like, oh, that's cool. But then that hurts you in the new algorithm, unfortunately. So here's some things like that I think are best practices. We've definitely worked with a lot of brands, and I think that some of this stuff can seem a little obvious at first, but a lot of it you'd be surprised. Like people don't really know and they don't really understand. First, top of the list, influencers, most of them have day jobs. So when you reach out to them, you know, and you're trying to work with somebody, understand that this is not necessarily what they're doing as a full-time gig. In fact, I'd say the vast majority of them are not. You know, making $200, $300, $400 a post once or twice a week or once or twice a month is not a career. So, you know, you gotta be respectful of that, and you know, when you reach out and understand that a lot of these people are not at your beck and call. And that they do have jobs, and sometimes it's nice just to talk to them and be like, hey, like, what do you do? Oh, you're a car mechanic? That's outrageous. No one would have any idea. But that's the truth. That's just what it is. So be open to that, understanding most of them are not, you know, aspiring actors and actresses who just post for a living. It's not really a living yet for most, you know. Provide clear and immediate value. This is something that we see all the time. I get people reaching out to our email account, and they're just sending these long emails about how we could work together and it could be in the future and this and that. And I'm like, just make it quick, you know? Like, just tell me, like, what's the opportunity? How does it help me? How does it help you? Where's the mutual benefit? And what do I get? You know, like, what's the real issue? Because ultimately, the longer it is, the more convoluted it is, the more that I'm just going to delete the email and move on. in-kind trades are cool, but they might be different than you expect. I think this is something that, people, certainly brands don't really understand. I think some of them, it's very obvious. We work with a lot of hotel brands. We work with airlines. It's very clear that they don't need to pay us because they could give us a really nice room or they give us a flight, and that's something that obviously we'd like. Other times we're working with companies and, they might have a cool surfboard. I don't surf, but I have a best friend who does. So that's something that, I could still potentially take that trade and we could work something out. And a lot of times something that people don't understand as well is that brands sometimes have exposure to different clientele than the influencer does. And lots of times, I say this all the time, it's like people look at influencer and they'd be like, oh man, like you got 1 million followers, like that's amazing. But like every influencer who has 1 million followers wants to have 2 million. They're not stopping there. So if you're a brand and you already have a nice following and you have reach and you have the opportunity to speak to a lot of different people, that's meaningful to a lot of influencers. So, don't be afraid to be like, look, if you're going to post for us, we're going to repost it. We'll post for you. We'll get you out into our community as well. That's a trade that certainly it's a little tougher at first, but as you're growing and you have some more traction, it's definitely something that's of value to an influencer. It's been of value to me. Be open to influencers who approach you. This is actually this picture here is one of the first things we ever did. It was from Tom Bean, which is a really cool American-made they make really like amazing bags, and they're up in Seattle, and we love them just as a brand. We thought they were really cool. We'd had some of their products before. We reached out to them. They immediately got back to us. They sent us a backpack. We did this basically for free. We ended up doing like 3 or 4 posts just because we love them first. And it seems silly, but sometimes, you might have people reaching out to you and you're like, this guy doesn't fit right now. He's only got 15,000 followers, or it doesn't, we back in our conference room, we figured out like what our social media plan is, and we don't really give free product to someone who's this and that. It's like someone reaches out to you and they've got any following, it's just like, go with it, like take it, because you never know. And ultimately, those people, like if you got to show them love. If they're showing you love right away, it's so hard. You'll realize it's so hard, because especially if you're a new brand, when you're in your infancy and someone reaches out and they think you're cool, take advantage of that, because a couple months down the line, or you start to grow, then all of a sudden you're going to start reaching out wanting free media, free exposure. They're going to be like, nah, get out of here. Like that doesn't work once we realize that you have resources. It's just, sorry, I'm here for the truth. Focus on one big idea, one big tenant idea, and avoid complication. This is something we see a lot. There's a lot of companies that have just a lot of stuff they want to get out there. They've got product, they've got brand, they've got brand story, they've got a sales that's going on, they've got links, they've got everything, and it's just sometimes it just becomes too much. Like, got to keep in mind, and these are actually older posts, so they were able to be longer, but you only get like 2 lines on Instagram. So you got to hit hard, and it's got to make sense. So I would say keep it really big. If it's going to be about, big ideas, if it's going to be about, brand story, then keep it at brand story. And then work with the influencer to figure out how your product might fit into brand story within what they're doing. But it can't be brand story and every single little piece of your product that you want in there. Because again, if it gets convoluted, it's just not going to hit. Have one specific goal and be clear. That's redundant. That's literally the exact same thing we just talked about. So be there, yeah. So, but again, it's like, it's okay. I think that sometimes people are afraid of being salesy on Instagram or any of these things, and it's like, it's all about the way you do it. If you really are trying to drive sales, then say it. Like, be clear about it. Let the influencer speak to it and give them buy-in and give them a reason why they should want to do that right away. But also be clear about what the real goal of the campaign is. So, next one is, would you take this deal? I say this all the time to people. Like, I'll get people on the phone. I'll be like, if you were me, like, would you take this? Would you take this deal? Like, look yourself in the mirror and just be like, is this something I would do? Do I actually see the value? And you can tell right away, like from an influencer standpoint, when I'm talking to someone on the other phone who actually believes that they're giving you value and providing value, whether it's, again, a trade out, a resource, if it's money, if it's something, and they think it's real, that right away. I mean, and as soon as someone on the other side starts going into sales mode about this is why, and this is this, and this is that, and it's all down the line, and eventually we'll try to make you a stockholder. It's like, relax, we don't need it. It's just tell it to us what it is, and think to yourself, like, does this make sense? And then also you get what you pay for, and money really does talk. So, and everybody has a different price. There's no set scale, and prices change depending on product, depending on influencer, and you really should be open to understanding that. It's like, I use these two examples here. It's unfortunately they told me it was going to be like a monster screen, but we ended up, I'm kidding. No, but we did two ones here that I think that did a really good job with the brand, if I don't say so myself. But we did the top one is Line 39, which is a really cool wine company, and the bottom is Hawke 11, which makes trail running and hiking boots. But we were able to include them in our story that we were telling in those posts, and they fit, and it all made sense. But in one of them, just full transparency, Line 39, they paid us because they're a wine company. It didn't really make sense. We were like, what are we gonna do? Why would we naturally go hike a mountain and have a wine party? It doesn't make sense. But we were able to work with them, come up with a story, and they paid us, and it was awesome, because we literally were like, you know what? This is good money. It was good money for what we wanted, and we were like, that got us up the mountain to go do this photo, and it ended up performing extraordinarily well. They got a ton of click through. They got a lot of exposure from it. With Hawke 11, it was like, yeah, you don't have to pay me, just send me boots. We needed new boots, so we got, and that's how it is. I mean, and truly that is how it is. It's like they provided something that clearly worked for us. We were able to again build them into our story, and it made sense. This was in Colorado. These are don't do's, and lots of times people do don't do's, and they give examples of other people, but these are mine. So these are two horrible integrations that I did, and I'm not proud of them at all. The one on the left was it stinks too because I actually love both companies, and I won't say their names, but the one on the left was like a digital thing that projects video against the wall, and it's really crisp and clear, and it was awesome. And from the start, when they reached out, I was like, I don't know how I would photograph. I don't know how this makes sense. We're a travel blog, it doesn't make sense. And they were like, no, you can figure it out. And eventually we settled on this photo that makes no sense for our account, and it was whatever. We've never done business again together, but at the same. Yeah, we're good photographers. It's beautiful. It was very. We did it well. We're not going to mess it up, but at the same time, it didn't fit and it didn't perform well. And it was a forced issue. And ultimately, the takeaway from that one on the left was basically sometimes it's okay. It just didn't work out, and that's all right. I still love the client. I still love the product, and I hope they still like me, but. It is what it is. So, and then the one on the right is actually our favorite matcha green tea company, and again, we love them, but they just wanted such intense branding in the photo, and we just couldn't settle on something that was a little more subtle. And ultimately, I actually ended up deleting half the comments, but they were all sell out. And it's just stupid because if people actually were watching, 17 of my other posts had other brands in them, but they made sense in the story. I explained it to them. I was like, please don't do a photo that's 66% of the screen is going to be your brand. People see through that, but it's okay. They didn't. That wasn't what they wanted to see. So this is a little dream scenario, which is nice. So I want to share this with you guys. Again, we talked about brands working with influencers where it makes a lot of sense. For us, this is easy. It's a no-brainer. Hotels are always going to be awesome for us. But even when we do work with hotels, we want to make sure that it fits in with the story. So this was something that we did in Colorado last summer. We went to the Boulderado Hotel, which is the top right, and we actually worked with them on a full itinerary of hikes, of things in the area, of great places to go, and we credited them in every single post that we did. We talked about how the Hotel Boulderado is the best place to stay in Boulder, and it gave us this incredible opportunity to explore, and they taught us about all these really cool places to go. And then it made sense to our audience when we included this really cool shot of the Hotel Boulderado in the top right, and nobody was upset about it. In fact, which is crazy, it was the most engaged with post out of everything we did in Colorado because it fit, because people were kind of expecting it, and we made it part of a story that became sort of longitudinal nature and didn't just come out of nowhere. And that's something to think about too, is like when you're working with influencers, it's like, how do you make it so that you can work with them on 3, 4, 5 posts, but maybe your product or brand is only featured specifically in one post, but it fits within a narrative that makes sense, so that when your brand does pop up and it does show up in the photos, people aren't like, what the hell, where did this come from? So it's tough to see down here, but you could, when you get the slides sent to you, you'll see sort of how we called them out and called attention to them. So that's that. I mean, I'll be open for questions at the end, but take my email down, reach out, send money, whatever you want to do. That's also my PayPal. It's my Venmo. Whatever, it works. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Jared. Cool. All right. So up next, we have Bailey Rosser from Vertical Networks. Take it away.
Hi, everyone. So, yes, as mentioned, I am currently Director of Audience Development at Vertical Networks. We're a small digital media startup right over in Venice. We specialize in creating custom content for Snapchat. So currently we are the people behind the Brother channel on Snapchat Discover. And we're also creating a lot of custom shows for their new shows product, which is great. I get to be the token nerd in this trifecta tonight and talk about data. Data and optimization, which is very exciting to me. Prior to being at Vertical Networks, I was actually on the audience development and creator strategy team at YouTube for several years, working really closely not only with brands and marketers, but also with content creators. And previous to that, I was selling ads to probably the likes of many of you on the Google ad sales team. So the through thread between all of those things has been data for me. And how do I use data to help creative marketers or creative content creators create smarter and reach whoever they're trying to reach more efficiently and effectively. So tonight, I'm not going to get into specific reports or this number means this thing, and instead I just want to relay my framework for looking at data and using that to optimize, whether it be an ad or a piece of content. So, how many people have heard of the marketing funnel before? You're all marketing. Exactly. So we're all very familiar with these steps. It was in many a sales deck that I pitched on the Google Ad sales team. At the top, you have awareness, consideration, conversion, and eventually brand loyalty. Unsurprisingly, this framework does not look very different from the funnel that I use when I'm thinking about how do I grow and retain an audience on various social platforms, whether that's Facebook, Snapchat, YouTube, etc. The first thing I think about is how do I effectively reach my audience? Second thing, how do I keep them engaged? How do I retain that audience? How do I keep them coming back as return viewers or content consumers? And finally, how do I drive loyalty? So Chris was harking on, what is your brand story? We're not product marketers when we're thinking about content and audience development. We're story marketers. We're thinking about how do we effectively tell our story, reach that audience, and eventually drive loyalty for that story, which will in turn drive conversions and all of these fun things on the marketing funnel. So this has been nailed down several times tonight, but ads are not content. Blatant and overt ads do not translate to effective audience development on any platform, really. I think we had perfect examples just a second ago. So what are the fundamentals when I'm thinking about audience development? First and foremost, and again, getting right back to story, you need to understand what is that story. What do you stand for, and who are you trying to reach? And the answer of who are you trying to reach is not people who will buy my product. You have to do a little bit more work around what are the qualities and the characteristics of a person for whom your product is really going to resonate, and define that. It'll make you a more effective marketer and a more effective content creator. So the second thing is reach. Discoverable content is the first sort of optimization lever, as like the nerdiest term I could possibly use for that, but I am who I am. Discoverable content. So let's think about YouTube as a platform. It's one of the things I know the best. What are some of the things that would be discoverable content? Sorry, call and response time. You didn't know this was going to happen. Any thoughts? So for me, really good discoverable content has a couple things. It has a clear, easy to understand title that has searchable keywords. On Twitter, it means being part of relevant conversations. On Snapchat, similarly, it means making content a lot and being part of those stories and those moments that all of the users are engaging in. It's doing whatever people are at that moment consuming and making it easy to find for users. If you're making your stuff hard to find, nobody's going to take the time to try and search it out. It's just not going to happen for you. Good packaging, that is really thinking about title, thumbnail, all of the stuff should not be afterthoughts. It shouldn't be the final thing that you do. Whatever your thumbnail is, or whatever your title is, or the share statement that you're putting above whatever Facebook post you have, that should be a core component of what you're thinking about through the whole process of creating social media. The second thing, retention. So content and user experience quality. If you're making bad, blatantly advertising content, people simply are not going to be retained. They're going to keep scrolling by, or they're going to swipe out, they're going to click away. Every other more enjoyable piece of content is just like a millisecond away from them. So you really have to go out of your way to create stories that are going to be engaging and captivating and keep their attention. Return, so this is retention, the difference between these two. Retention is how do you keep people engaged in that first moment where you actually grab their attention? And the second one is how do you tell a story so compelling that it actually prompts people to want to keep coming back and return to your content over and over again? The best way to do this is by having a very clear value proposition. And that comes back to, again, I'm just like reiterating your point over and over again. Having a clear story and knowing what it is so that you can be consistent with it. So that you actually have a very clear value proposition that you're offering to your audience on whatever social media you decide is relevant, and you're delivering it consistently. That means posting regularly. That means the merchandising on whatever profile page you have should be very clear and should not just try to sell a product, but it should try to sell the story similarly. And finally, loyalty is about conversation and interaction. So your audience is not just a passive consumer on these social media platforms. They really are searching out interaction and engagement. Several of the comments, if you are an actual brand or a product, are going to be about customer service, are going to be questions about the product, wanting to know how to troubleshoot the product, any of those things. And it is a disservice to yourself and your brand and growing loyalty to ignore that conversation altogether. So KPIs. KPIs are the key performance indicators, if anybody's unfamiliar with that term. These are the things that I look at to measure success at each step of the way. For the first one, reach, not dissimilar to the traditional marketing reach. The things you're looking at are just how many eyeballs actually saw that piece of content. So if you're on Facebook or YouTube or Instagram, it's the number of eyeballs. Views, likes, impressions, users. Doesn't mean they were engaged, just means they saw it. That's valuable, but it's not the most valuable. You go down the funnel, each thing gets more and more valuable as you go down. So retention, things that I'm looking at and optimizing for are how much time are they spending with my content? Are they actually spending a meaningful amount of time, or are they bounce rate, after just a couple seconds? That means I'm not doing a good job of retaining them at all. Are they returning? So some analytics platforms allow you to see if you have return viewers. Another good way to think about this is, do you have followers? That's people who have made the conscious decision to say, yes, I want to return to this. I want to see more of this in the future, so that's very valuable. Subscribers on YouTube. Loyalty then is audience engagement. So this is the number of comments, conversations, comments, and one that I really like across pretty much every platform is shares. And the reason for that is because it circles right back up to the reach thing. It's the thing that says, I am so loyal to this brand that I'm willing to evangelize for it. I'm willing to take this piece of content and say to all of my friends, hey, I endorse this. And I endorse this by sharing it, unless I say something nasty in the caption. But regardless, still more eyeballs. You still go right up to the reach section. So that is my overall framework, and I will say, the best part about leaving Google was that I don't have to endorse Google Plus anymore.